Thank you, Gil, for taking out the time to give this interview.
My pleasure.
Let me start by asking you an open question. What is your take on carbon emissions and the increasing problems it is causing to the world we live in?
Right. So I have to preface everything I'm going to say now with the fact that I am absolutely not an expert in climate change. I don't know anything more than, from reading a layperson would know about, global climate change, about atmospheric sciences, about any of those matters, right? I have a background in physics. And so I approach things in that kind of simple mechanistic way where I'm looking at inputs and outputs. And I would say it's more like a hobby at this point than an actual professional interest. So I haven't read any more than, most people, just newspapers, that sort of thing. I think, having said that, the evidence is quite clear that we are not only causing a serious increase in the emissions of greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, et cetera. But we're seeing evidence now of actual shifts in the climate and damage to ecosystems, right? I mean, I think that's just, the evidence is really, really abundant and at many, many levels, right? I'll tell you a story in a minute about a thing I learned about years ago. And I think we've known this for several years. And there's also, before it became common to talk about kind of carbon emission and global climate change, we used to talk about pollution, and that was a local problem. It's still a local problem, and that's something we ought to solve as well. And thankfully, they're very closely related. The overwhelming factor for me, though, is that the more activity that we do, the more that leads to emission of various things, right? And especially we worry about these greenhouse gases. And that activity is increasing because around the world, people want to live and are now able to live the kinds of lives that we do in the UK and Europe and such. So we have to really scramble to find solutions which go way beyond simply, modest increases in efficiency or conservation or recycling, all of which are fine to carry out, but we have to go way beyond that. So hopefully I answered your question.
So you knew that, you guys knew that this was going to happen, but you didn't know how to act on it.
Ah, I see what you're saying. Right. Yeah. So I think, many of these things kind of creep up on you in the sense that somebody tells you something or you read something and you're aware of it, but it doesn't mean that it's front of mind. You're aware of a lot of things, which, you can't simultaneously hold in the front of your mind, right? So you say, okay, yeah, I know about pollution. Sure. Well, okay, I'll try not to contribute. Well, what do you want me to do? I need to get on this plane, right? Recycling is a good idea. Yeah, okay, I won't mix glass, plastic, and organic waste, but I'm kind of busy right now, right? And so it takes a very long time for us to make behavior changes or levels of awareness. And so it can actually take, a lifetime. It can take a generation for that to happen. You guys came, younger generation, that's what you grew up with. So it was immediate. For us, it was, oh, wait, okay, some people know about this. We have to learn about it. There's a problem. Yeah, but what does it mean? It seems very far off, 50 years away, whatever. And it takes a long time to sort of go, ooh, we really need to do something about this. And then the question is, okay, yeah, everybody can make a difference, but not everybody can have a really big difference, right? Because you need a bunch of tools to do that and access and all that, or the motivation like you have to really go above and beyond. Not everyone can do that, and people are doing other things as well, right? People are, let's say, frontline healthcare workers are dealing with COVID now, so they're busy. We can't expect them to start working on climate change while they're trying to save people's lives, right? So similarly, for me, I think awareness came very, very slowly. There were all kinds of things. Even in my youth, certain teachers knew about things, ecology, environmental conditions. At university, learned a lot more, but still, it was early days. And then, the Keeling curve, all that, I learned about that. And then Al Gore had a lot of good talks and such about that. Um, I remember
So
must have been about
it was a main problem, but there was but people had to sidetrack with say for example COVID, which just sprung out of nowhere and had to be dealt with because it was harming their people. But since climate change is a more long-term effect, then people would rather solve COVID more than climate change because they would know that they still have time to solve it. But now scientists are saying that we don't have much time, which is about 8 years or so, and we have to act fast.
right. You're absolutely right. It's very hard to generate urgency on long-term problems. And actually that was pretty well predicted, was that we won't deal with climate change in a serious way until it's a crisis. And the problem is that climate change is such a big force that if we wait too long, we won't be able to deal with it, right? It will be irreversible. Well, arguably we've already felt the impact. So in some sense, it's too late if you worry about certain species or damage to the environment or other things. But of course, it's still something we can do better on. Whereas if we wait much longer, we're told, again, not an expert on it, we're told that we're literally will be too late. So yeah, we need to get going, right?
Yeah.
We need to get going. Yep.
So when did as well as like this, when you had to fix it, when did you actually realize that it was such a big problem that needed to be addressed?
Well, I think again, as I said, it's sort of a slow growth in one's awareness. But I do remember one story that's kind of a funny story. I was in Italy, in Sardinia, at a conference, nothing to do with climate change, and I went off on a dive, a scuba dive,
Okay.
uh, and it so happened that there was one other guy on the boat with me. Uh, and he was a marine biologist studying sponges, little sponges that are an early indicator of climate change. And I had no idea about any of this because it was quite a few years ago, right? And he was telling me quite a bit about that and saying, look, yeah, we were seeing radical changes all over. So it was so dramatic that this guy was just, going, yeah, it's a known phenomenon. For him, it was, already years into the research. So yeah, that really made an impact on me. So
Yeah, so it must have had this impact that was kind of surprising to you, that there was actually a big problem and you had no idea about it.
again, as I said, I did have an idea about it. It's just raising awareness to a level where it becomes front of mind. It becomes something where you're actually spending time during the week thinking about it is a different thing, right? I mean, I know people are dying of lack of food on the other side of the world, but it's not something I think about every day because, I'm busy in my own life, right? Maybe I should, but I don't.
Okay, that's interesting. So my next question is, um, so it would be great if you give some examples on how you have managed this in your day-to-day life. So, so like, do you own a car? And if so,
Uh,
which, yeah.
Okay, now I got it right. So I am not a big proponent or believer that individuals in their own little lives. I don't mean as advocates. You can advocate for climate change fixing and all that. That's great, but changes in your own habits, I think, have a very small impact. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do them. I'm not advocating against them. I'm simply saying that's not gonna, in my opinion, that's not the path to success. So let's take this example that you asked me about, the cars, right? So I currently do not own a car, and I haven't owned a car for 7 years, 6 years, something like that. 7 years, I think. That's not so much an environmental decision. It's just circumstance of where I live and that I'm able to get around without a car. And when I need to, I can rent one or use a train or a bus or whatever. I would have no qualms about going out and buying a car. I might think about getting a car that is more environmentally friendly, whatever, sure. But I don't think that that alone is going to lead to an option. Why? If I need to go out and spend 3 times more for a very good electric car, I'm probably not going to do that, right? If, however, you tell me, look, for a small extra fee, you can get a car that's just better for the environment overall, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable. So there has to be the options available for individuals, and then I believe people will make those. I don't go terribly out of my way to do other things that are good for the environment either. I'm not going to go out of my way to do things that are bad, right? But, I do travel, and travel has a huge impact, right? Flying and such. So those are things, and what we need is for people to have good, sensible options, like, can we make biojet fuel or clean jets or other methods of transportation where you say, look, it might cost a little bit more, or it might be a little more inconvenient, but not dramatically so, right? And then people go, sure, we'll do that. Right? But those choices aren't really there yet in many cases. They are in some cases, but the decision to not have a car is it's really not available to many people, right? They have to have a car unless they change their whole life around.
So then, if since you don't have a car, which vehicle do you which vehicle or mode of transport do you use then? Do you use multiple or do you use only? Oh,
I
you
walk.
walk.
Yeah, I tend to walk. I mean, so for instance, recently we had to go somewhere that was too far away, and um, we could have taken the train, but it so happened that that location was very poorly serviced by the train here in Portugal. So I rented a car. So for that weekend, we went away. We needed the car. We went there by car and we came back by car. But once we were there, we didn't use the car because the area we were in is a very small town, and what do I just walk everywhere, right? 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Yeah.
So you still use eco-friendly ways with that just one exception.
I would not. It it happens to be that it's eco-friendly, but I would not say that that's was front of mind. It was more like, I don't really need a car. We're getting around just fine with what we have, and so that's it. I do like the convenience that trains offer because it's very nice to be able to sit on a train, not have to drive, not have to deal with traffic, and get somewhere. And Europe has very good rail system, but again, it's not really an environmental choice for me. It's more a lifestyle choice.
And even the London Underground and the Great West Railway in here in the UK, it's all electric. So
Yeah,
it's no use of petrol, diesel, no.
right. And I think those are great options, and I used them when I was in the UK. So that was, yeah, I use them a lot. But for me, that's not the primary decision, right? It's kind of convenience and whatever. And I like having a life where I can walk to places rather than have to drive.
Okay, That's also nice, because it not only is it not only do you not own a car, and you said that it doesn't give that much of an impact for only one person. So but you also take different modes of transport, such as train, if you would use a train, or you just walk, or maybe cycle, then that's more environmental friendly than just using one car.
Right, right. But as I said, I don't think we're gonna work our way out of this by everybody jumping on a bicycle. That might be a small part of the solution, but it's not the main thing.
And since you're an innovator and inventor, are there any products that you have thought to create that will address the problem of carbon or CO2 emissions?
Yeah, so I try to spend a little bit of time thinking about this, and I'd like to increase the amount of time I think about it. But I'm currently working on a medical device, which is taking most of my attention. But I still here and there spend a little bit of time on. And so remember, I told you I think like a physicist, and there I see inputs and outputs. So the input, big input is the sun. Then there's energy generation on the ground and the emission that causes additional, feedback, if you will, in the heat cycle. And the way I look at it is the place I can make an impact, because I don't understand the environmental aspects so well, is either in generating the power in a better way, because we need power.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the way we're going to get out of climate change is by having a massive increase in the amount of power we can generate, but do so very cleanly and cheaply. And if we have that abundant power, we can use that energy to do things like people have been considering, like scrubbing the air or removing carbon from different processes, creating green cement, green whatever, hydrogen. But all of those take their own energy source as well, right? And so that's an area I spend time thinking about. And then I think a little bit about what I presented the other day, which was, can you do something to give us more time? Because I really fear that we won't be able to act fast enough, and we're underestimating how difficult the problem is. And it's difficult to generate that awareness and will and the urgency that and it would be good to have an insurance policy that says, okay, we're on the way, we're solving problems, but if we need an extra 10 years, we have it. And so that's where the idea of blocking the sun partly comes up. So it's a crazy idea on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a lot less crazy than everybody dying, right? So I think it's worth considering things that are really on the edge of imaginable, and doing things like putting up massive structures in space, which can filter out some sunlight, qualify as these kind of crazy ideas, but worth considering.
So I have an idea.
Great.
I'm thinking of a carbon extractor which has like fans that draws in all air, and maybe I don't know if it's been invented yet, but maybe some sort of material that only allows carbon through, and then there would be this big tank at the back, and all the carbon would get sucked into that, and then we could put that tank, once it's filled up, we into like some sort of energy efficient spaceship. First we have to make that more energy efficient, because we've got booster rockets, fuel, um so
Right.
combustion. So maybe find a way to launch that into space, and maybe leave it in some sort of station to like to have it as a reserve, maybe if say
Right.
if we need carbon, then we can take the carbon back down. So
Right.
maybe that was my idea.
So I think that's good to think along those lines. The carbon capture is something people spend a lot of time trying to do, and there's kind of two flavors of it. One is carbon capture right at the place that you're emitting, and I think all those ideas are very sensible. And then there's the kind of crazy ideas where you're trying to carbon capture just in the general air. And again, I think we have to think about even those crazy ideas as well. I'm not dismissing those, but I do think that they're about a million times harder than doing it locally. You always want to do something locally because to the extent you can, it's much easier to clean up something, in a contained area, in a dense area, than out in the air. As far as the carbon, once it's captured, there I think people have already figured out what to do with it. So there's all kinds of tricks people have figured out to take sequestered or to sequester the CO2 or take the CO2 and convert it into solid material that you can make other things from. So I don't think we have to send that into space. I think we're good once you capture it, but we need more ideas about how to capture it. And I'll give you one area that I think is very promising, but again, I know nothing about it. It's just, and that is that the ocean is our biggest sink of CO2, right? The ocean absorbs a huge amount. In fact, it absorbs so much that we're really worried about this acidification, right? The increase in acid that's killing off the coral and things like that. But perhaps there's a way to use that in a way that's not damaging to the ocean, but still takes advantage of this huge sink and maybe increases the efficiency of that process. If somebody could figure that out, that would be an amazing solution. That would give us many, many years. We still want to reduce how much carbon we're pumping into the environment, into the air,
Sorry.
but
On is so one of my questions was related to this what you're saying right now. If money and technology was not an issue, and if you had access to all the funds and technology needed, what would the invention like that be that could immediately impact climate change and
yeah.
options?
Okay, so I think I would do it in two areas because those are the two areas I know about, right? The first is energy generation. And I think that for the next, I don't know, it's hard to put a timeline, but let's say the next several decades where it's really urgent, I think we can generate pretty clean energy using something that I worked on years ago called an energy amplifier. The ideas have evolved, so I don't want to oversimplify it, but basically, it's a nuclear reaction that's driven by a high power accelerator. So it's a very big project, very expensive. On the other hand, very safe. Um, and I think if we put a huge amount of effort in, we could make that in the next decade, and it would produce clean energy all over the world, right? We could build 100 of these in all the major, population centers, or even 1,000. Now, I don't think that's great for, say, the 100-year timeline, but we need time. So we need a way of generating enough power to satisfy all the needs we have, plus all the cleanup methods. And that would be one area. The second area is and maybe it's premature to do that, but I think if we built massive space structures to control the amount of sunlight hitting the Earth at that kind of 1 to a few percent level, we we would have a way that doesn't impact the atmosphere in any way, in the sense of we're not introducing powders or anything there that might run away from us. And so we can easily turn this thing on and off, right? So
Yeah.
if we start going too far and we go, oh no, we've introduced some instability, we open the shutters, so to speak, right? And I think that is something that would require a global effort at the most extreme scale, but it's probably worth doing.
And there's also a channel called Kurtzexakt. Credit to them. They created this idea with some partners it's called a Dyson Sphere. So what this is, it's like, I think you might have heard of it.
Yes.
It's like where you launch mirrors to the sun, and then you have like a whole cluster of them, and then they can all beam their energy back to Earth.
Okay, so yeah, so a Dyson sphere is a Freeman Dyson came up with the idea, and the idea is that you surround a star so that you're capturing all its energy. And it's a wonderful idea as a fun science fiction thing to think about. And we could use, you wouldn't have to go anywhere near that level in order to get an awful lot of power from space. So there's ideas called power beaming, where you take, say, massive solar panels, put them in space, convert the electricity to, let's say, laser or microwave power, beam it down to Earth, and convert it back. It's a good idea, but honestly, for the next 10, 20, 30 years, the cost of launching things is so high and building things in space is so high that we actually need to do the reverse. We need to power beam from Earth to space in order to do the kinds of things in space that we need to.
Then it's
So I
back to
think,
the original, back to the loop where we need more power on Earth, like from
right,
Earth itself.
right. And if you think about it, Earth is an awfully big place to make power, and we should be able to do that for the next century or so. Maybe beyond that, we start thinking more radically, but for at least a century, we can generate a lot of clean power.
Okay. That's a yeah that, and I think it's also kind of a crazy idea because you also have to like to reduce the cost of launch. You also have to get it to other planets because then it would the distance, and you won't need as much fuel. So
Right.
that's also why I think it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, I think it's not that we shouldn't be working on those far out ideas. It's just that if you say we have a sort of 30-year timeline, and in the next 8, 10 years, we have to solve a lot of the problems, then you have to be a little bit more contained, right? You have to say, okay, I can do big things, but I can't do things that no one knows how to do at any level, right? So because they have to be done in 10 years, right? Or start going in 10 years. So yeah, but we definitely need to put a lot more effort into this. And people like you pushing and making for building awareness is going to really help that.
Okay, that's really interesting too. What do you think is of holding all of us back from resolving this problem sooner?
Um, I think, and I don't want to sound cynical because I really think people can do a lot, but I do think that we tend to go, gosh, how can we put enough resources into this? And then you go, well, how much money do we spend on a global scale on things like entertainment or sports or pick some other topic? Um, and I'm not suggesting they're equivalent, they're not. One's for one thing and one's for another, but it shows you the scale, right? I mean, if there are industries that are multi-trillions of whatever unit of money you want, dollar, euro, pound, and if you took that and said, look, if we put multiple trillions globally into climate change uh, reduction in all kinds of ways, right? I think we would see a pretty big impact really quickly. So I think the money is out there, right? The resources are out there, and it's a matter of starting to shift our priorities and say, well, and I don't know where from. I don't want to, I don't want to answer that for the world. I'm not qualified to do that, but you could imagine diverting a little bit from these areas of activity, human activity, that you say, well, it's not really essential to human function that we have this many of these ancillary activities, but it is essential that we solve these global problems, right?
And and finally, what is your message to all the viewers who are watching this?
Oh, I don't know. I think we need. So I was watching Bill Gates the other week, and he was being interviewed, and he just came out with a book on climate change. And in the beginning, he showed a chart that where carbon emission, CO2 emission, is coming from activity in our economy, right? And he went over it fairly quickly, but the thing that was really depressing about it was that there's almost no area that's more than 10%, right? So it's like 10%, 10%, 8%, whatever, which means there's many areas of activity that you have to fix at once to make an impact. And I kind of went, oh, this is going to be terrible, right? If it's one or two things, okay, but 10, 20, 30 things is really hard. But he had a very different attitude, and it really got me thinking. He said, we have to fix everything, so let's just do it. Let's just go across the board and better this, better that, better the other thing, better cars, better cement, better. And he's doing it, he's, or at least promoting it, right? So I think that's the message: is we need to attack this problem in many ways. Not all of us are qualified to attack all the ways. Well, no one is. But we can each take some area and go, I'm going to try to put my efforts in over here, right? So let's do it.
Okay, thanks for the interview and chat, Gil. I think from my perspective, I think those opinions and different views taught me a lot, because I you can understand from say for example you, an inventor's perspective on what holdbacks there are and what you can make with and what is needed, as well as the future, right? So I think it was a really good conversation, and I think the viewers can really um like see what they can do, and they might understand.
Great. I hope so. I hope everybody gets up and does something. So fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you, and best of luck.